And we should be live. Thank you everyone for joining. Really excited to be here with probably one of the more fun and interesting webinars we've done on basically creating agents. We've got 3 separate groups that are going to talk about some awesome stuff that they've been working on. Minor logistics before we get started. This is being recorded. It will be available at the URL afterwards, and then we'll also post it on YouTube. So if you miss any part, no worries. We will we'll start with quick introductions from everyone, and then we'll jump into around like 10-ish minutes presentations by folks. And then at the end, we'll have a lot of time for questions and answers. So if you have questions about any of the work that's being presented here, if you look to the on the right of your screen, there's a little chat session, which you're probably in by default now, and then there's a little box with a question mark under it or inside it. Please put any questions you have there, and basically when we're going through the questions, we will look for there. You can also upvote the questions that you think are most interesting. So upvote the ones that you want to hear answered, and we'll answer those kind of like in order. This will largely be focused on, or this will be focused on creating characters and giving language models like personalities. And so there's a lot of stuff in LangChain, but we're going to focus on that for today. So please try to keep any kind of like questions focused to that in general, and ideally on the projects that are being worked on and discussed here. With that being said, maybe we could do some quick intros. So Michael, do you want to start with a quick intro?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, it's a big privilege and honor to be part of this webinar. Thanks so much, Harrison, for inviting us all. I was fortunate enough to work with the LangChain team for a couple months. And so the things I'll be talking about today are going to be the various things I've done while working with LangChain. Currently a research scientist at DeepMind. So I'm calling you guys from London at the moment.
Thank you for joining us all the way from there. Jenny and Austin, do you guys want to go? Maybe Jenny first.
Yeah, sure. Definitely echo what Michael said. It's great to be here. Super excited for this talk. So myself and Austin were both new grads this year from UC Berkeley. I graduated with my bachelor's, double majoring in electrical engineering, computer sciences, and mechanical engineering. And Austin and I built this service we call Metropolis at the UC Berkeley AI Hackathon, and we won the grand prize there, which sort of is what led to us being with this talk today. Austin, you want to introduce yourself a bit more?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Austin. Like Michael and Jenny said, thank you for having us, and it's great to be here today. Like Jenny said, we're here because we won the grand prize at the UC Berkeley AI Hackathon, and we're really excited to share what we built with you guys today. As for me personally, I just graduated from Berkeley with my master's in electrical engineering and computer science.
And did you guys start Metropolis at the hackathon, or did you have ideas for it before?
We basically came up with it during the hackathon, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, can't wait to see that. And then Akash, do you want to go?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Akash. I work at Milk AI, which is a startup that me and my friend founded a couple months ago. And we've just been experimenting a lot with characters. Right now, our current iteration is kind of like an AI gaming companion, but that's not the stuff that we've built out in the past. And excited to show you what we have built out and all of the things that we've been thinking about.
Awesome. And Akash and I used to work together, so that's fun as well. Right. All right, Michael, do you want to take it away and give a quick, jump into your talk and presentation?
Sure, sounds good. I'm just gonna go share my screen. Okay, so everyone can see this.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is the characters webinar. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of the work that I've done while I was working at LangChain, relating to everything characters related. So I want to start off by, So I want to kind of start off by highlighting this very interesting phenomenon that took me by surprise, which is a lot of people talk about how ChatGPT is really popular, taking the world by storm. But I was very surprised to see that if for those of you guys who are familiar with Character AI, it's basically this website where you can talk with virtual avatars of whatever you want, whether it's book characters, real life characters, and it's just like a chat message with, like a chat room with like AI simulated characters. And I was surprised by how fast it was growing, and it also has extremely high user retention compared to ChatGPT. And I was trying to think about why this was so popular, and I think it's perhaps best captured by this quote from Steve Jobs, which is this idea of if you look at the evolution of technology and media over the past, I guess, few decades, we started off with static media such as books, then we moved on to videos, dynamic media, and now we're kind of at the point where we can actually have interactive media, where we can actually talk with characters from books and ask these sources questions, interact with them, think about what if scenarios. This is something that sort of traditional media such as books and videos cannot give you. So now all of a sudden with LLMs, we really have this ability to be able to interact with these media artifacts. And so I was looking at various ways you can do this. So currently the way kind of these chatbots work, I guess, is as AI assistants. If you think about ChatGPT, if you think about Bard or Claude or all of these AI sort of products out there, they're always kind of like a two-way interaction between the AI and the human. But you can actually extend this to various different other scenarios, like AI talking with AI. So in this particular section, I'll just go through these various different examples I've made with LangChain to kind of showcase the various different ways you can create these simulations of characters, AI characters talking with each other. So here you can make Dungeons and Dragons. You can give these agents tools. So in this particular example, you can, I was showing how you can have a debate where the agents look stuff up on Google search. You can also have multiple agents talking with each other. Now the thing with multiple agents compared to two agents is that there's the question of which agent speaks next. With two agents, it's pretty clear who speaks next, but with multiple agents, you have this situation where there's an additional degree of freedom. And so you can do a round robin, or you could do this. You can make the agents vote on who wants to speak next. So this is pretty fun. You can also have like a more authoritarian type of speaker selection mechanism, such as like a talk show, where one agent chooses which other agent to speak. And beyond just dialogue agents, you can also have agents interacting with environments. So for people familiar with reinforcement learning, traditional AI has been focused on AI agents interacting with environments. And you could actually do that too with these LLMs. So in this case, I was working on examples of how you can have multiple agents playing poker with this environment called Petting Zoo. You can also have single agent environments, such as agents playing. I forgot which game I did for this, but I forgot which game I did for this, but there's various games you can play with text on its own. And a couple months ago, I was invited to attend one of the simulations panel one of the panels in SF talking about agent simulations. And so one thing I thought would be fun was to basically create a simulation of the simulation panel itself. And so you can play with it here. I think it's the link's on my Twitter, but like you can basically can people hear this?
Diverse human interactions, enabling AI to better understand and adapt to individual communication.
Right, so all of these characters in this particular app were real life characters in the simulation in the panel. And so this is one of the nice things you can do with these apps, because you can basically simulate alternative possible ways that real life people can talk with each other,
enhancing their ability to handle real-world conversations and improve human AI
And which of the strategies did you use for this? Was this the authoritarian one, or the one where they choose, or?
Yes, this is the authoritarian one here. So the panelist moderator is under the hood choosing which speaker speaks next.
Nice.
Right. So yeah, I don't know. Oh, I guess there's no scroll bar.
Agent chatbots.
But anyways, this app is online. You can play with it and have a lot of fun. And so oops. And so the next thing I did was take this generalize this idea a little bit more, which is to say, rather than create a specific simulation of agent characters in a particular situation, why not make these why not condition these dialogue agents on existing corpora, like books, movie transcripts? And so what you can do is you can so what I did was I made this repo where you can upload any corpus that you would like, and then directly chat with a character inside the corpus. So here's an example of what that looks like. So the way this works is you would drop a file of the, like in this case, it's a movie transcript of Thor: Love and Thunder. So this is transcript right here. You can choose a character name, and here it outputs a particular JSON, which has a short description, long description, and greeting. You can directly export this to character AI. Okay, I guess it's full. But if you ever want to create your own characters on character AI, you can just take this particular dictionary, paste it in, and directly chat with it. But one of the issues with character AI is that it only takes this sort of JSON as context, and so it's not really grounded in it's difficult to ground it in actual events in the particular story. So what I did with data-driven characters here is I made it so that it can retrieve snippets from the transcripts to be able to chat, to be able to respond. So like here we can talk about like, you know, we can chat with the character. So asking Thor, right? So we can. What is your biggest challenge?
And so what exactly is going on under the hood?
Yeah, so what's happening under the hood is we basically take this transcript. So there's various different types of agents you can, or chatbots you can run here. One is summary type of chatbot, one is retrieval chatbot, one is summary with retrieval chatbot. So the summary chatbot basically just takes this summary description and uses that as part of the context to be able to respond to the human. So every single time the human provides an input, you append the character description with the human message and use that to create a response from the agent. In this particular case, we not only do that, but we also retrieve we retrieve snippets from the transcript itself to condition the character's response. All right, so this is another example of the things you can do with characters. I also want to highlight, so after doing a lot of this, I was, all of this has been really fun, and I was really excited to see various other people building stuff on top of this work from the community. So I can highlight a few works. So one of this works is the What If GPT, which I think is one of the first Streamlit apps I've seen that basically takes these characters and creates fictional scenarios that you can, where these characters chat with each other. So in this case, I think this guy, Min Choi, basically made a demonstration where you can make these Harry Potter sort of fan fiction type of simulations with these dialogue agents. This is a partnership that we at LangChain did with the Farama Foundation, who basically hosts and maintains the petting zoo repo, as well as the gymnasium repo, which are basically the multi-agent and single-agent standardized RL environments, respectively. And this is a fairly recent project called A Chat with Yourself that basically uses the data-driven characters framework that I just demoed and uses it to chat with an earlier version of yourself from your Facebook chat messages. So you can basically chat with yourself at various different points in time, give yourself advice, or see what you yourself back then would have thought. So I thought that this was also a very, very interesting example. This is by Caitlin Hennessy. So I will probably stop there. And this is my contact info if people want to reach out later on.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. I have one quick question, which is basically, so a lot of the character stuff seems to be routed in like retrieval, right? And retrieving information, whether it's previous chat messages or things from the story. Like, if you just did that, like, is that good enough to get a character chatbot, or do you need more things in order to give it like a persona, or like what's the delta between just like straight retrieval versus retrieval plus other things, or what's missing with straight retrieval, maybe?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there's a whole host of additional things you can do beyond simply just retrieving from a transcript. One of the problems with directly retrieving from a transcript or any sort of corpus is that because of the size of the context length, you might not be able to get enough information fit inside the context, and all of that information is likely very, very low level, just about the details of specific events, rather than abstract information about the character's beliefs, thoughts, and feelings at that particular time. And so there are things you can do to ameliorate that, which is to basically summarize the transcript or condition that summary on a particular perspective. So conditioning the summary of the transcript from this character's perspective or some other character's perspective. So that is one example of things you can do for creating, I guess, character personalities. Then there's also other things that you can do while you are chatting with the character. When you're chatting with the character, you are also creating information that is going to be stored in the character's memory. And that could be valuable information for informing what the character says next. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do with reflecting on the chat history, summarizing it, discarding irrelevant memories, and essentially synthesizing all of the history that you've accumulated so far into higher and higher abstract sort of descriptions of the character. So I think all of these things are generally pretty wide open that I haven't seen many people try. And so if anyone in the community wants to try that, I think that could definitely be promising.
Awesome.
I had a quick question. One of the problems that we've run into when creating our like simulated characters in it and chat-powered or the NPCs is that because of the way these large language models are trained, they kind of have a bias toward talking very formally or talking in a very like specific tone, right? I was wondering, kind of, have you run into this issue, and like what have you done to kind of ameliorate that?
Yeah, this is a good point. I think I've also encountered some examples of this. I think specifically, I guess the issue you're referring to is the content of the content of what the characters say might be quite reasonable, but the style in which it speaks is actually kind of hard to tune, I guess. Yeah, I've run into this myself. One of the things I've tried to do is to basically explicitly prompt it with example snippets of the particular character's speaking style and say, given this speaking style, and given what you're about to say what you're about to say in this particular speaking style. Except I haven't really seen that. Like, I think that works a little bit, but that doesn't work very, very well. I haven't actually. I think this might be hitting the edge of what these LLMs, at least as of a few weeks ago, can currently do. I think it's very easy to prompt an LLM to speak like a pirate because that's unconditional on whatever. Like it's a sort of unconditional style. But if you want to condition it to speak specifically on with this particular style, I found it also a challenge.
I see.
Have you guys looked into uncensored models?
I haven't.
Yeah, I think I found a lot of use in uncensored models as like filters on top of regular large language model outputs from like OpenAI or Cloud, for instance. I think like part of the issue of like a lot of large language models from OpenAI and like Cloud is that they've explicitly been trained to respond in specific ways, and so the RLHF process kind of optimizes for assistant like responses or rule following, as opposed to like open-ended conversation, in which, for instance, uncensored models have much more kind of an advantage in, given that like the entire process for optimizing for safety or for a very specific mode of talking and interacting has been kind of taken out of the entire process.
Yeah,
awesome. Are you going to talk about that in your presentation, Akash?
Yeah, that's like briefly like part of like kind of what my presentation is. Yeah.
All right, maybe we'll save that for then because we're running a little bit up on time. So Jenny and Austin, do you guys want to take it over now?
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see this all right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, to briefly reintroduce ourselves, me and Austin started working on Metropolis at the Berkeley AI Hackathon. Was only, I think, just over a month ago. And since we won the grand prize for it there, we've been working with Skydeck, Berkeley's startup accelerator, to sort of grow it into potentially a full company. And I should mention that there's one other person that actually helped us with this project. He was like in our team on the hackathon, and he's a close friend of ours named Kiwan. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today, but just wanted to give him some credit. So onto Metropolis itself. Our initial vision at the hackathon was actually a very simple one. We wanted to help developers and studios make cool games. And in particular, we wanted to help indie devs make AAA scale games, and we wanted to help AAA studios make like even bigger, more AAA games. And in terms of how to accomplish this, we had the thought that there's a lot of procedural generation tools in the gaming industry at the moment. And they've been in the industry for a while. They save people tons of time, but their focus is largely on generating things like 3D models, textures, and terrain. So all these very like visual oriented things. On the other hand, there isn't much out there in terms of proc gen for actual interactive gameplay mechanics and gameplay concepts like NPCs and quests. And well, this is sort of for good reason, because really there's so much more complexity behind generating human-like decision making, right, than say generating the shape of a mountain. But this sort of technical challenge is what we were trying to solve with Metropolis, and that's kind of where AI and LangChain came in. So what did we have to build? Well, at the hackathon, a sort of workflow to create lifelike NPC behavior is sort of what won us the prize. And so we created this service that you can see on the right over here that takes some basic information about your in-game world. You can just a big like lore dump file into this box. And it'll take that information and spit out NPCs with customized routines, personalities, and of course, dialogue trees. And what I really want to emphasize is that although like obviously a lot of the hype around LLMs right now is based on like dialogue and conversation, sort of like we've been talking about with the previous presentation, with Metropolis, we've been trying a lot harder to just focus on this concept of behavior and taking action. So that's what sort of all of our NPCs come out with, is like a set of behaviors that they exhibit. And then to sort of wrap up the developer workflow, after you've generated these NPCs, we made engine plugins for things like Unreal Engine, Unity, that allow developers to take these files that our service pumps out and just essentially drop the control logic for these NPCs straight into their existing code base, straight into their existing game. So with this feature, what we had in mind is that in like a matter of minutes or maybe hours, depending on your CPU power, you could fill an entire city with NPCs that walk around and interact with the world and like really like live in the world in a realistic way. So that was what we built in the hackathon. Since then, we've been looking to.
Can I ask a quick question here? So like, okay, so you create these NPCs, and that gives them kind of like personalized routines, personalities, dialogue, prompts. What does it look like for an NPC to actually use kind of that information? Like, what's the agent kind of like there? Is that a separate kind of like system that's, again, backed by like GPT-4?
Oh yeah, so like what you're asking is like, we get this logic that says like, hey, at like 9 a.m. I want to eat breakfast.
Yeah.
You're asking like what we're supposed to do with that info, right?
Yeah, like how does that hook into the downstream thing?
Yeah, so that's sort of what we had in mind with our engine integrations, right? We don't really want to like step on developers' toes and take away their freedom to define how these sort of interactions work. So the way you hook things together is essentially, we have this like controller class, and you just tell it like, hey, the eat breakfast action corresponds to this callback function. And so you just package in all these like very action-oriented callback functions into like our system, into our APIs. And then we have a controller that just like manages like, when should I call what?
And the nice thing about these LLMs, right, is that you don't even really need like a detailed like description or really even to understand what these callback functions are doing. You just have to say like, oh, like the LLM agent has the move tool available to it, and it can use that to move. And then whatever happens on the back end, like in your actual video game, that's up to you. We just want you to tell us what these affordances are. And then because you can express these affordances in natural language, it becomes really easy for the LLM to kind of understand and move around the world just with a simple text description of what it can do.
That's awesome. And so like I think like I always see part of the difficulty of building these agents is like integrations with these particular kind of like tools, and like you like because you probably needed a different tool set for Unreal versus other kind of like game engines. Like how difficult was it to create kind of like these tool sets and get them kind of like hooked up properly? Like was that a lot of the time, or was it actually quite...
I think in terms of, so thinking back to just specifically that grueling 24 hours in the hackathon, I think a lot more of our time proportionally spent on getting the LLM to behave properly and output things that made sense, because that can be very like finicky and difficult to really debug. Whereas we all have like plenty of like software engineering experience, so on the API creation side, it was like comparatively smooth.
That makes sense. Sorry for interrupting. I was just curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, it's great. And like moving forward, if anyone has any questions, feel free to interrupt me, or else I'm gonna just talk forever. So NPC generation was what we like really fleshed out during the hackathon a month ago. But since then, we've been sort of looking to apply our technology to a broader scope of things, mainly combat behavior and quest lines. So for combat, the idea we had is that for NPCs, non-player characters, we can procedurally generate these sprawling decision trees that help determine the NPC's next course of action during like a real-time combat scenario. So for example, there's tons and tons of factors that might influence a simple decision like whether the NPC wants to fight or run away. They might consider like how many allies they have, how many opponents they're facing, how much like ammo or resources they have, how much health they have. And what we can do is just automatically generate the logic and code for that, so that some poor engineer doesn't have to spend a day writing like 50 if statements. And this ability to like procedurally generate this kind of logic could, one thing that I think is really neat is it could really enhance how NPCs collaborate with one another in combat as well. Where, you know, if you're playing with allied NPCs, perhaps one could jump in to defend you when you're in danger, or one could like fall back and do like ranged attacks if you're closer to the enemy, stuff like that. Like complex behaviors like this just become much easier to put together if you can just procedurally generate it on. Finally, the concept of generating quests is pretty self-explanatory, I think. The one thing I do want to mention is that in a game, most good quests aren't about like doing things just for the sake of doing them, right? They usually need to have some kind of narrative or storytelling value, where, for example, by completing the quest, the player progresses the plot, or at least learns something new about the world around them. And I really just want to highlight how LLMs can naturally help us take these sort of what I call ulterior motives into account. Whereas, you know, just having a static function doesn't really work. And then in terms of how we incorporate LangChain into all of this, I think the first point, NPC behaviors, and then the last one,
also,
quest
Jenny,
line
your
generation.
screen may be frozen. Like I'm seeing slide 3 still for whatever reason. I don't know if other people are seeing the same.
Oh, there's just like a lot that I'm seeing on this slide.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
I'm about to move on. Yeah.
No, never mind.
Yeah. So NPC behavior and quest lines are the main two areas where LangChain really like gives a lot of value to us. So I'll hand it off to Austin to talk about that.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. In order to create more immersive and realistic feeling NPCs, one thing that's really important is for you to be able to see them like walking around the world and going about their day, right? And really feeling like they're going about their day with a purpose. And we kind of use what LangChain does for us is make it really easy to create these LLM agents that are able to reason about, like, given that I have this set of affordances, this set of like functions that the developer has passed me, how should I use these in order to accomplish some sort of open-ended goal? And I guess the nice thing about our use case, right, is that it doesn't, the agent doesn't even really have to necessarily achieve the goal during this time frame. It just has to generate realistic behavior that looks like it's sort of following the goal that we have in mind. So for example, here, let's say that our NPC's goal, his life dream, is to learn as much as possible about cacti. And so we would create an instance of the React agents using LangChain and have it essentially interact in a simpler textual version of the game world that you have provided us, which is just like a list of the locations that you have and a list of the actions that the agent can take. So this guy, he might first wake up and think to himself, man, the library is a really good place to learn about cacti. I'm going to move to the library. That's what he does at 9 a.m. Takes maybe an hour to get there, and then he thinks, now I'm at the library, so I should read about cacti, and he takes the read action. And then now that he's read a bit, he's determined now I should maybe try to go examine some real cacti in the wild. And he takes the move action to go to the desert, and he spends the rest of his day there. And for each of these kind of pairs of like locations and actions that the agent has on his itinerary, we generate custom dialogue trees for each. So that if you talk to him while he's at the library, for example, then he'll say, hey, I'm at the library, I'm learning about cacti, you want to learn some random cactus facts? If you talk to him at the desert, then he'll be aware that oh, I'm at the desert and I'm observing like cacti in the wild right now. So that's kind of what we built at the hackathon, was this ability to generate goal-oriented routines in for these NPCs that really make the world feel like it's coming to life. Jenny, could you move to the next slide?
Yep.
So this is something we're working on right now, is how to build in a quest system with LangChain. Because you can imagine that like this structure of basically telling the NPC like, oh, you should move to the library, you should do this and do that in order to achieve a goal. I mean, that's pretty much what a quest is, right? We're basically giving a quest to the NPC. What if we could generate this kind of same routine for the human? Here, I guess it's slightly different because, as Jenny said, sometimes there are these like ulti-motives or developer goals that we should keep in mind. Like, for example, maybe the developer wants this quest to have the effect of having the player meet the villain for the first time. But the nice thing with LLMs is that you can just put that into the prompt and it'll automatically take that into account. And so here you might imagine that you have your LLM agents, your React agents doing essentially the same thing, thinking, oh, if I were the player, then the library would be a good place to learn more about cacti. Then at the library, you should take the read action. And then maybe a book might recommend that the player perform a field survey of some cacti, so he has to move to the desert. And then the villain might be in the desert destroying the cacti, which is how you would come in contact with the villain and meet that developer goal.
Austin, I have a bunch of questions. So first of all, like, how many different actions are there? Because one of the things that I've noticed is that when you give agents like a lot of actions to choose from, they can sometimes get confused. And so I'm wondering, like, yeah, how many different actions were there, and did you observe that at all?
Yeah, so I guess we didn't really have the chance to observe how things work with a large amount of actions. For our demos, we were only working with maybe a set of 5 to 10 actions.
Nice.
But these actions are kind of different per location that you're at. For example, you can't read
Nice.
if you're not at the library because, well, like, what would you be reading in the desert, right?
Yeah. Okay, and then related to that, like for the move to the library, like
Mhm.
did you say like there's a set of places that you can move? Like did you constrain kind of like because like what if it was like move to the moon or something like that? Like would the agent ever say that?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of the software engineering surrounding this product is kind of, and I guess LangChain in general as well, is making sure that the output of the LLM is kind of structured in the way that you want. So we did constrain it to a set of locations. Like we're imagining that the developer will just tell us like a list of like string representations of locations, like literally just say like, we have a tavern, we have a desert, we have a library, etc., etc. And then at the tavern, you can take the drink action and the talk action and things like that.
And then did you oh, I'm assuming you told the prompt in some way like, hey, you can move to these places. And then did you do any validation that it selected like one of the allowed ones, or did you kind of try, like was it good enough at following instructions that it never really came up where it varied from that?
Yeah, I guess the thing about large language models, right, is that even if they work 99% of the time, you still have to take care of that pesky 1% case. So a lot of the time it does work pretty well out of the box, but there are some cases where like the string isn't exactly what you said. For example, instead of the tavern, it says like I should go to the bar, which like means the same thing, but it's not like technically the right location. In which case we just have the tool that represents movement output like observation. Bar is not a like a real location in this world. Here's a list of the valid locations that you should be able to pick, and then it will automatically correct itself.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we do a fair bit of post-processing with everything that's returned by the LLM, just because it's kind of wild sometimes.
Makes a lot of sense.
Next slide, I think.
Oh, I think that's basically it. If you guys want to stay up to date with what we're working on, then we have this link where you can sign up. Also free to contact us at any of those places below, or you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. But yeah, that's basically it. And if there's any questions, any more questions, we're happy to answer.
Super interesting. I already asked all my questions.
I think there's. Oh, sorry.
I mean, I saw one in the chat, I think, around like NPCs and how do you deal with them once they get socially programmed as we do. Let me try to share that. So yeah, so like basically, what if they get stuck in infinite loops? Or like, yeah, like there's kind of like this looping behavior and
I think I see what you mean. So I think this doesn't really become that much of a problem for us because we don't really simulate the behavior to such a depth where like this kind of looping is likely. Like at most, the behavior that we say is like a day's worth of a routine, right? So it's, you know, really hard to end up in some kind of weird like that's gonna do XYZ every single day and do nothing else loop when you have one day to accomplish your goals.
Makes sense. There's a question related to that. There's another question around like the memory limit as well. So like, do you see that getting like overflown? And if you're talking about a day, maybe there's not enough actions you can take in a day to kind of like overflow that. But have you considered like, yeah, for longer running quests or objectives, how you deal with the memory limit there?
Yeah, I think currently there's not I don't think it's going to be an issue. Right now, we've been using ChatGPT, which I believe has a context of like 4,000 tokens or something. But I mean, Claude 2 just came out with 100,000 tokens.
Yeah.
So we haven't run into any problems with using ChatGPT so far. I imagine even if you have like really long running quest lines or NPC routines, that it's not going to take up 100,000 tokens of context.
All right, maybe with that we can move on to Akash.
Let's do it. I will keep it short, sweet, and I have not prepared something as kind of, I guess, product focused as everyone else has. But what I will do is I'll kind of show you guys what the kind of different iterations of our product have looked like, what the different things we've tried are, and yeah, we'll jump into kind of the character work we've done. So yeah, we at MilkAI right now are creating AI gaming companions, but historically what we've been doing is exploring the character space and different ways to kind of include characters in games and different kind of social experiences, both real life and digital. So kind of like the very first iteration of this was before like me and my friend had even started the company, was like a D&D game. And the D&D game was like pretty simple. It was basically like create a AI like kind of dungeon master that would create a storyline, create characters, and then get a ton of people together and then interact with the D&D master. And so have them choose their own characters, have them kind of create their own sidelines and side quests, and then have the dungeon master kind of guide everything. So create NPCs that they can talk to, create the dialogue that, you know, these real people are actually engaging with in the NPC, and craft a whole world, not just through AI, but through kind of AI-human interaction. And that was something that we did kind of, I think, in mid-February. Harrison was there, and so were like 10 other people. And we thought it was a very interesting experiment because it got us interested in like the ways that we can actually use characters to engage humans and make humans like more interested in the characters that we do actually create. And so kind of from there, we took like a hard right turn and did a completely different idea. We were inspired by the AI Simulacra paper that was released in April to kind of create our own version of that. And while we never released it, we had originally kind of like created it as a reality TV show experience. And what that essentially meant was you would be able to watch these kind of characters going about doing their daily routines, and it would just be kind of a 24/7 live stream. And you know, each character would have their own motivations, their personalities. They would kind of map around the world that we had built and kind of just do things. And we were able to get all of that running, but I think the thing that we struggled with was getting people to care about our characters and getting people to care about, like, you know, reality TV in general. And I think that's like kind of a running theme of character work for AI development in general. Like, how do you get people to care about your characters, and how do you actually get people to find interest in your characters? And so that kind of led us to focusing on like characters only. And so in the last kind of like month, what me and my co-founder have been doing is building out kind of character only experiences, right? We released a live stream like, you know, a couple days ago where you would kind of go up and like talk to our characters and just try to sell them milk. And what we really tried to focus on is make the conversation interesting, as opposed to kind of, you know, adding a ton of like the integrations that you're seeing like across the board that, you know, kind of immerse the character in a world, but, you know, don't necessarily focus on like the quality of the dialogue, which is what we kind of wanted to focus on at the moment. The second thing that we did, and this was released like 2 days ago, was kind of a pizza bot. And this was more of like, you know, a fun marketing thing, but we essentially created a bot that would give you free pizza if you got the bot to, you know, like them or like you enough. And in the process of doing that, I think we've like learned a lot about, you know, what makes characters interesting, and then how to actually get characters that are interesting from kind of regular like language models like GPT-4. But as I kind of hinted at earlier in like kind of the talk, like also using uncensored models. And so I'll share with you like kind of 3 learnings that we took away from kind of the breadth of experiments that we've done in the last few months. And so the first one is kind of that like unpredictability is human. A lot of people like kind of, I think, wonder like what makes a character something that's interesting, right? Like what makes a character something that like you continually want to talk to. And I think the kind of like idea that we settled on at the end of the day was this idea of like unpredictability, right? Like I can talk to Thor, or I can like talk to like Joe Biden, and I can have him respond to me in a way that's like consistent with like, you know, past responses. But I start to feel like really fun and like really engaged when I talk to a character, when they say things that are completely unpredictable, that, you know, kind of like show me a new perspective on life or show me a new perspective on conversation. You know, when they roast me for some like random reason because, you know, they have their own likes and dislikes, and kind of focusing on like the human aspect of the character and like the kind of dynamic evolving aspect of the character is something that like we kind of really wanted to, you know, hone on, and we think people have actually enjoyed. And so I'll show you like 2 screenshots here from like a Pizza Man bot, which, you know, some of the people that were playing the game actually really enjoyed. And so in one picture, you know, you're getting like kind of Pizza Man roasting the other person, saying like, hey, like prove your taste buds are as tough as your talk. The guy saying like, oh, I ate a ghost pepper, and he's like, oh, well, you're super dumb. Like, you know, like if you ate a ghost pepper, your taste buds must be as dumb as your brain. And then the other panel, kind of like this idea of like, oh, prove yourself, like that you're actually impressive, and then the user says they disappear, and then the Pizza Man is like, oh, you're just proving how insignificant you are. We think like kind of those interesting interactions are things that are, you know, super valuable to like people that engage with the characters at the end of the day, and are things that kind of contribute to this feeling of like connection and this feeling of caringness for the character not just being something that's one-dimensional, having like, you know, likes, dislikes, and some things that evolve over time. The next kind of point that we kind of settled on was that like safety is boring. And so I'm gonna show you a slide here with a little bit more like raunchiness, but this was kind of from our original game and live stream. And so on the left side, you have Michael Cera talking about trying to sell drugs to you know, rich people and like making money off of that. And then on the right, you have Ash Ketchum like getting really mad at our character who just wants to sell him milk, and saying like, you know, he'd rather like chug expired milk than listen to like what we're trying to sell him. And kind of getting those kind of like aspects of humanness where, you know, you have extreme emotion, or you have kind of like this kind of creativity that is out of the bounds of like kind of regular you know, RLHF like you know, training parameters of what a lot of these models are trained on, is I think an incredibly important part of like the interaction with an AI character. Because if your interaction with an AI character is just good all the time, we actually believe that that's not as good as like having those like kind of small points of friction that might not make you like super angry or mad at your character, but kind of create that healthy friction that's like kind of indicative of human relationships, as opposed to, you know, kind of one-sided like I prompt the AI character and the AI character responds all the time. And so baking in curiosity, we think, is also very important. And then the last thing that I think we kind of decided on was like, with all of these things, there's like always like an importance in like needing to care about the AI character, right? Like creating characters for the sake of creating characters does not work, is like something that we found if there's no reason to like actually care about the character. And so the final thing that like kind of we've kind of like learned is you know, finding the right context, finding the right integration, finding the right like place to put the character and the backstory to give a character, either procedurally or for an individual person, really helps go the extra mile to like forming like really meaningful relationships, really meaningful connections with characters, that like we think at the end of the day is like what actually makes someone like willing to come back, willing to engage, and like really have a fun and enjoyable experience above something that is kind of like a stylized version of something like an NPC would already say. And
do you have a concrete example of how you guys have done that, or how you're thinking about that?
Yeah, so there's one thing that we're actually doing right now is like integrating into like actual games. So as like an AI gaming companion, one thing that we've been like working on is like integrating into, and we'll be releasing something next week, but integrating into Minecraft. And so if you have an AI gaming companion that you can just talk to, right? You might already care about Minecraft. You might already care about like the video game that you're playing. How can you like actually get like more value about something you actually care about as an experience with, let's say, like a person that you can actually talk to? I think like the idea behind this is like very similar to the idea behind Discord. The idea being essentially that like the time spent in game is like kind of accentuated by like your social relationships outside of the game. And we view like AI and like basically needing to care about an AI as like, the AI integration being like an additional like means of like actually caring about a character. I think like one thing that like we've noticed with like a lot of like NPC characters, for instance, is like, you can talk to an NPC character, but the character needs to be dynamic enough and interesting enough and differentiated enough, for instance, from like other characters to like have some sort of like personal bond with the person. And if you're also trying to kind of like forge like a longer term bond, let's say with a character, or like that a person might actually have, having that kind of dynamic like ability to break out of like its role but stay within like certain like guidelines is like something that's very important. And so like integrating into things that people already care about, like video games, or for instance maybe like online communities, is something that characters can like have a lot of kind of benefit and like value in adding.
This is something I've always wondered about, like live AI gaming companions and dialogue agents, is like, how do you guys deal with prompt injection and prompt hacking?
Yeah, so we've actually tested a lot of our prompts out of prompt hacking. Believe me, we've had a lot of people do that with like live stream. Like we had one person try and get the player to like spit out its prompt, and it just wouldn't do that. The short answer is like designing smart prompts. And so like not having it be a free-form output, but like essentially creating a prompt which you parse at the end, and then you can then have like safety nets on top of. And then on top of that, like just general post-processing kind of methods to like avoid some of like the common prompt hacking tools.
I see.
Awesome. Well, we're out of time, but I want to thank all you guys for coming on. I think this is there's I think this is some of the most fun and creative stuff out there to use large language models for. I think it's a perfect kind of like I think it's a perfect application of them, and so I'm really excited that you guys all came and shared what you're working on. We'll put it up on YouTube probably tomorrow. I think there's hopefully we can do another one of these in a month or a few months or so, and look at all the progress that's been made, because I think there's I don't know, I really think this is like the most creative, fun application of LLMs out there. So wanted to thank you guys for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having us. We'd
Yeah,
be happy to come back in a couple months if you still want us.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in as well, to all the audience, and see you guys later.
Really fun
All right.
discussion.
Thank you.